raining now, and it's over. It's over. It's over. Tears are gonna fall and ending now, and I know that it's you gotta get over. I know I do, but I don't know how. I pretend that I'm in control now. I will fall apart till I walk away. And I said to myself, you're gonna be stronger. I tell myself it's better this way. Oh, you can't see tears in my
What's up, hackers? Welcome to Chill Code. I gotta tell you, I haven't done this much Apple stuff since my own MacBook Pro died in 2000 and I want to say 12. That's not true. I used to work with apps, or I used to work with Apple stuff in a fleet, but I always used a Linux machine to manage them. So this has been a bit of an adventure. For those of you who are just joining us tonight, first of all, welcome. And what we're doing is we're taking a look at period tracker apps. We are doing so in light of the recent Supreme Court decision here in the United States, which has essentially limited the personhood of women and people who can get pregnant. And so in order to ascertain what the relative safety of these people's data might be in the event that law enforcement comes a knockin' and decides to use evidence in these apps to attempt to prosecute, because in some states, abortion is going to be considered a crime, a felony. So we want to know what these apps are actually doing. Now, we're going to dive in as much as we can. Mobile apps are a little bit tricky, as we discovered last night, to analyze. So don't take any of this as legal advice or anything like that, certainly. But I do think there are some best practices that we can talk about. First of all, if you do want to look at, if you're in the market to use an app like this, you might want to consider an app that stores data locally. And there is even one that's open source called Drip that you might want to take a look at, especially if you're an Android user. GIF. I have not seen Shannon Morse's video for Hack 5 on period trackers. That's cool. I'll check it out. But we are taking a look at a couple in particular, and tonight I really want to dive down into one app that we didn't really have the tools to look at last night, which is Stardust. Stardust is a frustrating app because it ties tracking your menstrual cycle with astrology. But leaving the pseudoscience aside, it's not even pseudoscience, it's just mysticism. Leaving that aside, we want to take a look at the app and how it's used. Now, we looked at 3 apps last night. We looked at Stardust, we looked at Flow, and we looked at Clue. All 3 of them indicated that they use Firebase as their backend. Now, that's really interesting because of the way that Firebase works and the fact that it's not like they get to control the data at that point. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look at Firebase again and understand that part of it, and then we'll move on from there. So Firebase, if you're not familiar, is a product from Google. It allows you to have pretty much every service that an application would need besides your own front-end code handled as a service. So when I say every part, I kind of do mean every part. It can handle A/B testing. It can handle CI. It can handle hosting. It can handle authentication and authorization. And yes, it can handle data. And the data component, which is really where Firebase began even before Google acquired them, began as a real-time database. And actually, that's how I started using Firebase myself, was because the real-time database, which was actually just key value pairs, it wasn't structured data really in any meaningful way, but it was a really cheap way to get real-time data into your app without having to use WebSockets. And if you've ever done WebSocket programming, you know that it's kind of a pain. Firebase made that way easier. Now, in the years since that, that was, God, like 6-7 years ago, in the years since that, Firebase has matured, and there are a number of other products inside of the stable. One of them is Cloud Firestore, and that is the component that we saw all of these apps using. And we saw some indicators as to that. Depending on the URL endpoints that we saw requests getting made to. We saw that with DNS data. So what is Cloud Firestore? Cloud Firestore, I think, is best understood if you're familiar with MongoDB. So it's a document-based NoSQL database. Think of it like a JSON object or structured and nested JSON objects containing your data. And that's kind of it. It just makes it easy to create, retrieve, and update that and delete that data without all of the muss and fuss of even an SQL database and then what we would call an ORM, an Object Relationship Manager, to handle that transaction. Firebase and Cloud Firestore makes that super simple. And in fact, I actually want to build like maybe a little baby Cloud Firestore project tonight so we can see what it looks like and understand how we might interact with it and how we may be able to test some of what Stardust is doing based on that information. But here's the basic idea. So we have Cloud Firestore, right? And by the way, I have launched this particular app in dev mode, which means by default, it is universal read allowed. There are no rules protecting this data. And now you would imagine that most people would not do that for their prod apps, and I certainly agree, but there may be folks who do it for their dev apps. So up here, you can see we have data rules, indexes, and usage rules. Notice that I have none other than allow read write. I don't have any indexing going on. Let's just go back to our data. Let's make some data. So we're going to make a collection ID. We'll call it stuff. And then we'll call it thing. And the field foo is going to be equal to bar. That's how it works. Okay, now, how do we interact with this thing? There are kind of a couple different options, actually, for interacting with this thing. Probably the easiest, though, is we can set up a Cloud Firestore app. We can set up all that in JavaScript or whatever language you want to set it up in. But in addition, there is a CLI. There is a Firebase CLI, and that's kind of the easiest way to get this going. So I have that installed in Kali, and let's see how this looks. So if I do Firebase projects list, it should tell me that I've got the PD test project. Indeed, I do. Okay. And now that I've enabled Cloud Firestore in this project, I'm hoping that I can do Firebase Firestore indexes and see what it says. The caller does not have permission. Okay. What can I do? Because it is Firestore that we care about. Firestore list indexes. It's just config export. Let's see if we can make an index and see if we can grab it then. Oh, I can't make an index because there's not enough data. All right. Firestore commands. Yeah, it's pretty much just that. Okay, so in order for us to actually get it, we're going to have to write a quick app. That's fine. This is worth our time. But let's explain why first. Hey, Trent. And hey, Matthias, good to see you. Let's explain why it's worth our time to dive into Firebase for all this. Okay, so first of all, huge shout out to Matthias here because Matthias hooked me up with the IPA, the iPhone application package for Stardust, which was what I wasn't able to get last night. And I finally have my Mac up and running, and I have Xcode. As you can see, I've got an iPhone simulator running. I have like things working the way that I want, sort of. But here's what you need to know about IPAs. Not India Pale Ales, which some of them are okay, most of them are a little over the top. No, iPhone applications, they are glorified zip files. And inside of the zip file, you're going to have this thing called, you're going to have the meta information, right? And then other than that, you're going to have this thing called a payload. And inside of the payload is a .app. And if you've spent any time with a Mac, you will know that a .app is just a folder displayed differently. And if you don't believe me, check this out. So this is a .app. And I'm going to go into my applications folder just because it's more fun to do it this way. And I'm going to go into, I don't know, chess. And I'm going to right click on it. And see this? It shows show package contents. Hazy's East Coast are the best kind of APAs. I agree on the Hazy. I'm not going to give it to you on the East Coast. Just because I got to represent the West Coast. Although if you are ever in Philly, the absolute best brewery that you need to go to is called Tired Hands. Or their kind of offshoot called Fermenteria. That is the place to go. And if you're interested, go look up their list right now. Their stuff is bananas. They do a lot of saisons and really weird sours and things like that. Anyway, so notice that I just opened up the .app, right? I was able to right-click this and go show package contents, and look, stuff. And here's what makes a .app. right? There's a code signature. There's going to be resources. Eventually, we're going to get to an executable at some point in one of these, right? Usually in macOS. Yep, there's the executable. This is the actual thing that runs, but it's bundled with all of the other things that it needs. Importantly, we have these things calledplists. Now, plists are super important in macOS. They're used all over the place. And they take kind of two shapes. They take the shape of plain text. It's kind of weird. It's like it's one file extension, but it can either be a binary blob or it can be plain text, and in which case it's represented as XML. If you can get a regular plist that's represented as XML, no problem. Cool, you can just read it. Some of them aren't, though, and then you get into some like interesting things that you can do to convert them. All right, blah, 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 blah. Why are we talking about this? Well, I went ahead and opened up the Stardust.app here in Kali, and I'm really just using Kali because my fluency in the Linux command line is such that I'm going to be faster doing it this way. And then when I need to do something that is Mac only, I'll pop over to the Mac to do it. But and also this Kali machine that I'm using is actually running locally, meaning that so for the Mac machine, the Mac that we saw is running on the enterprise server, the virtualization host, our Proxmox friend. But this Kali machine is just kicking it here on Hyper-V. So performance is a little bit better. In Maryland right now, and our go-to is Sapwood. Sellers in Columbia. They do everything from hazies to mixed fermented sours. If you're ever in DC, DMV, definitely check out Sapwood Cellars. I am in the DMV. I mean, I used to be in the DMV somewhat often. So, good to know. Thank you very much for the rec. I don't drink like a lot. But I do really appreciate interesting beer. Okay, so here we are in the Stardust.app, and if we ls on it, we got stuff. What are we looking at here? Oh, that's JADX. We can close this. Get a little bit more window real estate here. Okay, so we've got some nibs. Nibs are UI components, as the names might suggest, right? Birth control table view cell, birth control view, blank symptoms. So they may become interesting, but there are other components that I'm definitely more interested in looking at. So for example, I'm going to look at my plists here. I have 3. I have the Google Service Info Dev, which is really interesting. Google Service Info.plist and then the Info.plist. And we're going to take them in reverse order. So we're going to start with the Info.plist, and I'm just going to Vim look at that to see if I can. Okay, so it's plain text. And I'm not going to learn a whole lot interesting from this because this is kind of like the manifest for the application, right? So it tells us that it's ARM64. It tells us the interface style. iPhone OS 15.2. Okay. And got some app icon stuff. Nothing too wild here. All right, here we go. Now, Google Analytics registration with AD Network enabled. The first thing you might think when you see this is like, oh man, they're bundling Google Analytics with this. And that was my first thought too. But this is why getting some practice reading XML is super valuable, because that is the key and the value is false. So in fact, we gotta give it to them. They are not enabling Google Analytics for this. And that's important because when you set up Firebase, you have to make a choice pretty early on whether you're going to use Google Analytics or not. As Serena, aka She Networks, was saying on Twitter today, Firebase is the back end of Google Analytics these days, which means you have to use it if you want to use Google Analytics in your app. So we're trying to think which way is the square, which way is the rectangle for this. All Google Analytics apps are Firebase using, but not all Firebase apps use Google Analytics. That's the way to put it. Just saw this from Zach Whitaker. Stardust sends the encryption key through its API. Does it now? With its new app. I don't know if I have the latest version. We'll see if we can take a look at that too. Through Burp and use the new data encryption option. Saw the encryption sent. Hold on a second. How the hell did Zach get it going through Burp? I guess he's doing it the right way with Frida. API moon faces calculate. Oh, that's real interesting. API Zodiacs. API.thestardustapp.com, which we saw when we were doing our domain enumeration as well. And there's the API.mixpanel. Yeah, this is all the stuff that we saw in our DNS. So even though we weren't able to do this kind of proxying that Zach... Oh, sorry. You're not seeing what I'm seeing. Here's that. Even though we weren't able to get this proxying going because we didn't have the Frida stuff, we didn't have a device like ready to go. We did see these domains just by doing DNS proxying. So there was actually some really rich data to be found there. And that was our first hint, by the way, that they were using Firebase. Yeah. And plainly, they're using it for user authentication, right? There's that Firebase auth account exists. But they're sending the encryption key. Oh, interesting. The encryption key sent back to Stardust via the API. I mean, it's a question for Firebase, honestly. Unless oh, wait, no, maybe not, because this is to API.thestardustapp. app. So maybe they're doing something with the encryption key before they pass it over to Firebase. Interesting. Hey, new Pixel Perfect, thank you for the follow. All right, let's continue poking at this. And of course, I should give my disclaimer, which is that I am not really an expert in any way, shape, or form when it comes to mobile app testing. So I'm coming at this from a pretty new point of view. And if I'm doing something really dumb, or you have recommendations for things that I should be doing, please, 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 I'm really eager to hear them and learn. All right, so here's some fonts. ITS app uses non-exempt encryption. Okay, so nothing super interesting here, except there is this bundle URL scheme, which I think may come into play later. All right. So that was the first plist. So far, so good. Let's take a look at the Google Service Info.plist. Okay, this is where it starts to get a little bit... Now, hey, Tonic. I'll also say... we're not looking for vulnerabilities. And this stuff is packaged inside the app that goes to client side. So I put this in the same category as pushing F12 on a website, right? It takes a little bit more effort, but the data is there, right? I'm not even disassembling anything. It's just there. Hey, Tonic. No, you're right in time, actually, because this is the first kind of thing that we want to see. Now, here we have a client ID, which we sort of saw before, right? The apps.googleusercontent.com. A super F12. I like it. Trying not to sneeze. And we also have an API key. So this is kind of, let me show you what makes this, and you can see that it looks very similar. I'm going to go to console.cloud.google.com. Okay, go to projects page, and we're going to go to no. Oh, I always forget where that is. Okay, my first project. What? Test proj. What is happening? There, you. It says it's scheduled to be deleted. EJ47. But that's not right. It's a PD test. There. I don't know why. That's good job, Google Cloud. A+. God, I hate this platform. I really do. I don't like GCP at all. It is to my mind the most opaque of all three big cloud providers. Okay, but here we are. Let's take a look at this. We're going to go to I am an admin. No, I'm going to go to API and services and go to credentials. Perfect. So you can see it has some that have been made already. Service accounts, API keys. Let's create credentials, or let's create an API key. Application restrictions, none. Okay. Fine. And I'm going to be blowing these keys away, so I don't care if you see them. Right, so here's your API key. Let's delete that. And let's try another one. Try a service account. See what that looks like. Yeah, so if you, there we go. So if you create a key like this, I think it's for the service account, it has all of those credentials inside of it. And so again, I'm going to blow that away. Encryption probably won't even help. They'll just reckon your period from the envelope metadata. I don't know who they are, and just is a dangerous word. I do agree, though, that encryption is not the entire story, right? It's about where the data is stored. And that's part of why Firestore is so concerning here, because it isn't actually Stardust's terms of service that you need to worry about. It is Google's. If your data is getting stored in Firebase, then Google gets to decide whether data is disclosed to law enforcement or whoever else, not Stardust, right? They don't have full control over that anymore. And to be super, super clear about that, as a reference, let's go all the way down to our privacy. If you've never read this document, you should do it. This is the Google privacy policy. And we go to sharing your information. When Google shares your information for legal reasons. I'm going to read this out just so we have it both written here and then for those listening. We will share personal... Take two. We will share personal information outside of Google if we have a good faith belief that access, use, preservation, or disclosure of the information is reasonably necessary to meet any applicable law, regulation, legal process, or enforceable governmental request. We share information about the number and type of requests we receive from governments in our transparency report. Now, that absolutely would get covered in any state law that bans abortion, right? If your data is getting stored in Google's data centers on their services and a subpoena comes in for that data to Google, they are going to give it up. And there's very little that the customer, aka Stardust, can do about it. They say, we frequently push back when a request appears to be overly broad or doesn't follow the correct processes. That's just about courtroom stuff. If they've done the research and they have a subpoena and it's or a warrant and it's properly handled, that data is going. I'm not a lawyer. I have to say none of this is legal advice, but there's nothing that I see here in this language that protects you from having this data handed over to law enforcement. Technically, HIPAA has the same qualification, though. HIPAA... I mean, I know that you work in this space beneath your gaze. HIPAA is a little limited, though, right? Because HIPAA doesn't protect the law against law enforcement either. It also doesn't apply to just random... Yeah, it applies to healthcare providers and health plans, right? It doesn't apply to just, like, random businesses. Idolismar, 1P, 2As. 1P, 2As. There is no such thing as... HIPPA. It is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Law enforcement will go to providers first. They want to prosecute, not your period app. I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't really know what they'll do. Especially in a case like where you have bounty laws, like in Texas. Who knows where they'll go? Tibbs, thank you so much for the raid. Good to see all of you. Hope your stream went well. All right, so to the point though, we have in this P list some data about Stardust's Firebase credentials, right? So we have their client ID, we have their API key, which looks very similar to the API key that I just generated, right? And we even have storage bucket stuff. And in fact, I'll set up some storage in our test Firebase app to see what that looks like. Just giving perspective about Google complying with subpoena. Provider will too. Yes, that is absolutely true. Storage. So if we enable storage for this thing, you can see that I get this gspdtest af.appspot.com. Sure, I'll upload a file. Let me upload hackerman.gif. I'm so glad I had that. Dope. And look what we get. We get this Firebase storage.google APIs, blah, 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 blah. But notice that there's like a pattern here to this. Now, also notice that it's giving me a token for access. And that does matter. Right? So even if I'm in incognito mode, right, I can still get at this thing. Without that token, though, definitely cannot do it. So very similar to other cloud storage. That token matters. Right? And I need this Firebase storage.google APIs, pdtest, af.appspot.com. Right? So I can't just like go list out directories. You know what I mean? Or can I? Let's go back to that Firebase CLI. I don't know that there's a storage. Oh, wait, here we go. So, oh, hell yeah. Perfect. This is how we do it. Now I remember. I knew there was a CLI way to get at the stuff in Firebase. Firebase and init will do storage. Use an existing project. PD test. Yes. Let's go. Storage.rules. Awesome. And then we'll also init Firestore. Delicious. Okay. So if we look at this now, if we cat firebase.json, what does it have in there? Okay. Now, does that change what I can do? I really thought there was a way to... I'm going to just do a quick Google on this. Firebase, CLI, Firestore, collections. Can you do it with the G-Cloud? Yes! Oh no, there's no difference. Just creation. Is it ComTrues? Yes, it is. Very cool. Okay, so we'll come back to that concept in just a second. But let's head over to the payload again and start our app. And let's now take a look at the Google Service Info dev.plist. So this is a little bit trickier, right? Because this one, in an attempt to, I don't know, obfuscate data for whatever reason, it's not even that well obfuscated because it's just text inside the binary blob, but it is not a plain text file. As you can see, we have unprintable characters, unprintable bytes in here. So how can we work with this? There is a tool on macOS called putil that will convert plist files from binary to plain text mode. But we're not on macOS, so is there a way that we can do it? Yes, there definitely is. Python has us covered, actually. So this is first party in Python. So how do we do this? What we want to do is... I'm just getting my windows over a little bit here, and I'll close that. Fire up IPython. And we're going to do import plist lib as pl. Okay? And if we do pl dot, it'll give us kind of an autocomplete of what we can do. Now, we basically want to do, if we do load question mark, it'll tell us reads a plist file. FP should be a readable and binary file project. So if we do pl.load and Stardust app, thank you, autocomplete. Yeah, I'll do dev.plist. So stir has no object read. So it's not really load. Hey, Inspector Diameter, unless you're making a joke, if you want to just say, like, if you want to give me instructions, you got to tell me why I'm doing it. Don't just tell me to import something. Oh. Sorry. Yeah. I was a little in the zone. It's been a minute. I don't have XKCDs, like, indexed that way. I do have Aquoods indexed that way. If you give me any situation, I can tell you the Aquood that is relevant to it. But not XKCD. Anyway. Alright, so we'll do this. With open... We'll do it RB. That's F. We're going to do P equals PL.load. F.read. And now, watch this. Done. That easy. So again, we have the database URL, Stardust dev, for the Firebase IO. We have the storage bucket. And also some important stuff. Is ADS enabled? So, okay, again, we don't have, and is analytics enabled? So Google Analytics and I think ad services not enabled. That's good news, right? Sign-in is enabled, right? So they're handling auth through Firebase, which is fine depending on how they're doing it. Firebase, one of the reasons to use Firebase is because it kind of will handle your OIDC flow. If you want to do OAuth/OIDC for authentication, which is a fancy way of saying if you want to do sign in with Google, obviously in this case, but even if you want to do sign in with, like, I think GitHub or God, what else do people use? Microsoft, Facebook? Don't ever do that, by the way. I don't think you can. I think they deprecated, right, the sign in with Facebook. But those are OpenID Connect authentication pipelines. And Firebase will just do that for you, right? Which is handy. You should, if you can at all avoid it, you should never write your own authentication pipeline. Definitely leave that to the pros. Use Auth0, use Firebase for that. Yanner, social sign-ins are such a joke. Why do you say that? I don't know that I agree. I'll tell you what, I'd much rather have multi-factor authentication on my Google account, right? And allow Google to protect... Well, let me give you the counterpoint to that. So I would much rather have Google handle my account secrets, right? And then have multi-factor on that, and then let them provide tokens to the authentication, to the service. And now I don't have I don't have risk on the smaller, less capable organizations that they're going to protect my username and password, right? And I'm also not necessarily, I mean, maybe I have MFA enabled for those services as well, and I should, but I am worried about a token there, not my actual secret. And so I actually feel like OIDC is about as good as it gets right now for proper passwordless, right? Where I don't need to, yes, I am concentrating my risk, but I'm concentrating my risk in a highly trusted entity. Rather than distributing my risk across multiple riskier entities. Single points of failure are dangerous when your risk of failure is high. They are less... If any of those points of failure have a high risk and you don't want any of them to fail, then that's less attractive than a low-risk single point. Sandor, thank you so much for the... Thank you for the sub. Yeah, so the FIDO... Like, YubiKeys are interesting. I have one. I'll be honest, though, I use Authenticator as my primary MFA tool. TOTPs, I feel like, are pretty solid. Fun fact, you can set up TOTP for Proxmox if you want to. You can actually set up your Proxmox instance to use Authenticator or Duo, whatever. Okay, so anyway, I use Google Authenticator. It doesn't, like, matter. I tried LastPasses for a while, but it was such a pain. Okay, so this information matters. And it matters because you want to know if we can, like, start getting information about it, right? This is why I had this is why I had the window so far over, because Firebase's text is so large. Yeah. Well, I don't want to do that. How much of your time is spent resizing windows? It's, you know, I don't want to think about it. Yeah, I have Power Toys set up. And there's like, there are things you can do in Tmux to make it a little bit faster. We could go into that for a minute, but I don't. I have been playing with a different. Did I install it in here? In Kali? I can't remember. I definitely installed it on my Windows terminal. Let me go to... Just make a new one of these. Did I not? I was raving about it. I thought I installed it here, but maybe I just installed it on my laptop. There's another... I think it's called Zelige. Yeah! This thing. Which is a pretty nice Rust-powered multiplexer. That has some nice creature comforts out of the box, including helpful keyboard shortcuts as part of the UI. Look, Leon, I didn't choose Rust. Rust chose me. And I'm not alone. All right. Silent J16, thank you so much for the follow. So basically what I want to do is I want to set up I don't want to do it that way. I'm using the gcloud command line to try to see if I can make this happen. Gcloud. Key file. All right, let's make a key file, or let's make a service account the way we did before and see if we can reproduce. I'm over here. Okay, so here's our blah. We're going to create a new JSON key. I'm going to save that. And we're going to just paste that right in here. And then we're going to look at it. Okay. So what I don't have is a private key. Unfortunately. But I have everything else, right? I have the client email, the client ID. All right. So I can't just take that information and auth with it, right? All right, let's go and delete that service account so that you miscreants can't abuse it now that you've seen it. All right, going back over to the storage, let's see what else we can do with that. Yeah, it doesn't really work. Or does it? Nope. Where does the Firebase CLI store its configuration? That's the question. Okay. I think we're going to have to do this like the app way. And what I mean by that is, in order to start looking at this stuff, we have to make an app. Which is fine. I am prepared to do just that. So, I actually have that ready to go here. I was playing with this earlier. TaggedTech official app. We don't need one of those. Also, I despise apps. The web is good. So this is kind of how this works, right? Where we have Firebase config, API key, auth domain, storage bucket, that's the sender ID and the app ID. Actually, careful with most there, Leon. Yeah, it's probably true. React and React Native, though, are totally different beasts in terms of performance. You do actually get some performance benefit from using React Native rather than like a web view app. It is true that you can use some of the same languages to do it, but the way that it's rendered, like it used to be the case back in the Cordova days, that mobile apps would be largely web view, but with the rise of things like Xamarin and even Swift UI, honestly, it's actually gotten a lot easier to write mobile apps in native than it used to be. So there's been kind of like a shift in that, where there are more native apps just because it's easier to write. That being said, writing for the web or using React and then React Native means that you can write in one language and deploy to anything, which is appealing. What you don't get with your browser, right, are the integrations with the rest of the mobile environment, right? Intents. So sharing to other apps and things like that, which you may want, you may not. Okay, so I'm going to have to knock these API keys off, but I'm going to leave off this Firestore part and just load this in a browser. Just kidding. No, I'm not, because this is in WSL. So instead, what I'm going to do is fire up a local web browser. Okay. So it doesn't look like anything's going on, but if I open up the console, you can see that the Firebase app has been initialized, right? So you can kind of see that it's working. Now, what I want to do is I want to replace all of this information with what I got from... Here comes that resize again. I've got to find a faster way to do this. I know that there is a shortcut for, like, quick half and halving it. I always forget what it is, though. Okay, so the API key is here. Now it's here. The auth domain. What is the auth domain in our case? Firebaseapp.com. So presumably it would be, yes, like this. Stardust Dev 8619E. It's not it's not WinArrowKey and Tmux, Tonic. That's what I'm talking about. I know how to resize Windows. Tmux Windows is what I need to resize quickly. Come on. Give me a little credit. Message sender ID. Oh, there it is. So all of this is here. And then what's the app ID? iOS. Maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it'll be like, hey, you can't use an iOS app like that. But we've now just basically transplanted Stardust's Firebase config into our own. What will happen? Probably nothing. Probably an error. Like, hey, idiot, you can't do this. But maybe not. Okay, so that worked. So we were able to activate the app. So now the question is, can we get other stuff going? And I want the Firestore. Actually, do I want storage? I want storage. Now, something kind of annoying is that, so the way that they're doing this, right, is they're using import, which is fine if I were doing like a node, or like a built application, which I can do. I'm just I'm being lazy and I don't want to do it. If I have to, I'll do it. Like, it's gonna solve a million problems if I just bite it and build out a parcel project, right? Yeah. All right. Let's do it. Fine. One day I will not do web dev, but not today apparently. Okay, let's do this right then. mkdir source. All right, very good. Now that we've done that, we can actually do the Firebase stuff the right way. And so we're going to structure our project. Yes, I know. All right, so index.html. And we're going to get rid of this. Took a web dev class about to do a file project because I earned a passing grade. I gotta tell you, I actually love web dev. I really do. Let's make sure we've got Firestore added correctly. No, no, no. I gotta close some stuff because I'm getting lost here. I actually love this. I love styling and layout. I think that stuff is super fun. And I think it's a lot harder, to your point, than people give it credit for being.
32.
Why? Hold on. Like, go to docs here. What happens? Build. Firestore. There we go. That's what I want to do right here, which I thought I already had. Import GIF from Firestore, Firebase/Firestore. Let's rerun this just in case I don't have that. I'm pretty sure I do, though. I found web dev to be fun as a hobby, but I don't know if I'd like doing this job. Yeah. It depends on the project. I had a blast as a contract web developer. But that's also because I had the privilege of working on really interesting problems. I know that not everybody gets to do that. Why is this? Oh, right. It says it's declared but never used. Well, we're going to use it in a second. But yeah, let me show you. The French paintings catalog at the Nelson Atkins Museum. This thing right here. This thing was my biggest project, and basically what I had to do is reinvent their image viewer. So it was basically a static site generator, but they had to do all this extra stuff in order to like indicate their data. So for example, adding some icons here, a lot of like special CSS to make this happen. And then yeah, like styling new stuff. And come on, where's Bacchus? And then this was the really scary one. So I had to create an image viewer that was automatically resizable, based on the data that we were given, right? And resizable with the view. And then, in addition to that, this viewer also has to allow you to view any of the additional data inside of the article on demand. And then the viewer also has to allow you to split into two views so you can do a comparative view. It's like, I used to work in an art museum, and I love museums. So this was really super fun to do. And it was a blast to do this for a museum. And if you ever go to Kansas City, please, please, please stop by the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. It is a phenomenal place. They have more than French paintings, but obviously their French paintings are pretty dope. Oh, God, we're all over the place tonight, aren't we? Still trying to... Okay, so we've got Firestore. Yeah, const db equals get Firestore. Thanks, me either, Gaze. That's cool. Okay. If we've done everything right, basically we're gonna do. I can shut down the Python server because we're gonna do this right. Package.json should tell me what I got. Nope, not even close. Great. npm parcel source index set. Yeah, I didn't think that was going to work. Let's install create directory for and then install parcel into your app using Yarn. We did npm. I have Yarn. I don't think this is going to work. That is definitely downloading parcel, though. And the question becomes, okay, so awesome. Yarn's working for us. So Yarn parcel source index.html should. Okay, well, we're getting errors. It's something. Browser scripts cannot have imports or exports. They're not browser scripts. Come on. Oh, type equals module. Need to do that. That is new, by the way. That never used to be a problem. Okay. Can we try that again? Oh. We gotta get rid of that. From Firebase/app. Okay, let's just take this and make it localhost 1234. Okay. So Firestore. Collection. I want to get data. Get doc. DB. List collections. Our store reference. I really just want the API reference at this point. There we go. The list collections method of the Cloud Start. It's not available in the web client library. Well, crap. Okay, well, what about for our storage? Basically, I'm gonna just take this whole thing. Out of 400. Let's see everything that storage can do. Doesn't really work that way. Okay. Let's go back to the app for a second to learn more about how it works. That might actually help us here. So let's go into the payload and go into Stardust app and actually see if we can find some more information. I'm just going to do a grep for Firebase. Everywhere in here. So there's the Google Service Info. There's the plist we saw. Firebase controller. Okay. You know what? Let's do just a strings on the Stardust executable itself. This is the actual binary. Interesting. Now, you might also wonder, is there another way we can look at this? And the answer is definitely yes. We have a couple of tools we can do this with, but Cutter actually will allow us to take a look at the Stardust executable. Why, yes, even on Linux. Cutter has a Swift descrambler on it, which means we can, in fact, it's not going to be perfect, but we can see some stuff. Most of these opcodes are going to be a little bit goofy. But if we look at the dashboard, it does know that it was written in Swift, right? And, in fact, if we look at the imports, it is finding the imports for this thing, right? We can see that it's importing these values, these functions. Excuse me. And yes, we have a strings searcher. There are a lot of strings. Hey, Miles and Abu, thank you so much for the follows. I'm finding this less revealing in this regard, just because there's so much going on here. And I don't think it's decompiling into useful data. I did also get the Hopper app, which is often what people say, hey, you should use this to disassemble iOS code. But I'm not seeing a lot of... By the way, this is just a trial. And sessions in Hopper, if you haven't paid for it, are limited to 30 minutes. But it is a neat tool that I haven't used before. It seems pretty mature. One of the things I did learn is that Hopper will show you strings byte by byte. So if I do find, like... the string Stardust. Look at how it's showing it. It's showing us in the address space, right? But literally byte by byte. Stardust app. So I don't know. I don't know how valuable this is. If we go to the same address, so where was that? (1006A2) AB0. I'm just curious if I'm going to find the same thing in Cutter. Oh, I'm way too high. I'm way too high. No, that was wrong. Can I just copy this? If I hex dump it, oh snap, that's much cleaner. Look at that. So yeah, the hex dump will show us the strings. Interesting. Right, so this is trying to, I think this is trying to disassemble it into like x86. Which, why would you bother? But the hex dump gives us the strings just fine. If I look for Stardust in the strings, will it show it to us? Yes, it does. That's actually nice to know that the hex dump works like that. Okay. Back to the matter at hand. I still want to know if I can get any of this storage data or anything. So, I mean, should I make a Python app? Damn, they don't have a Rust library. Otherwise, you know I would have gone for it. But they do have a Python library. Oh, interesting. So there you're going to need the service account. Right. Interesting. So that might be kind of their way of protecting the data, saying, okay, if you're going to do this for real, you're going to have a service account, but in the web, you won't. Which means you'd have to, like, guess at the endpoints. But I think... It's not just security through obscurity. It's simply like they deny you that API endpoint because you won't have a private key. Now, I have my Firebase database here. If you can guess the file name, you can read it through the web API, right? Well, we don't know. I guess we're going to try that. So we'll try it with our things. So we're going to... I have to set it back up to our data, but I should just go do overview started. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. All right, so I have storage, right? And if I try to do a /, will this work? So I'm still getting a 400. Your bucket has not been set up properly for Firebase storage. Please visit. Maybe try to read hackerman.gif instead of /. Yeah, that's where I was going, Matthias. But it shouldn't need anything. Yeah, that's still a 400. We get a 200 pre-flight though. But we're getting a 403. That's different. Permission denied. All right, so that is different. Just make universal read. All right, that was it. So the rules prevented it. But now the question becomes, can I do it? Because I want to be able to read from the root, right? Because I don't want to be able to just shoot right at that. Oh, yeah, that works. Okay, so... Nice. Now we're getting it. So now we're going to change it up and use the Stardust app config. And we get an undefined. Yo, but we're not getting, we're not getting a 403. Interestingly. Hey! It's still showing hackerman.gif. How is that possible? Oh no, did both of the... You're right. You're right. Damn it. You're right. Hold on then. Did I close Terminator somehow? Oh god, what a pain. Good catch, Matthias. How did I do that? What else do I need? I need the auth domain. And the sender ID. Good catch. I was like, I am losing my mind. And then the app ID. And this may be where we get burned, right? Because there may be some logic saying, hey, you can't do web stuff from the iOS ID. I realized that I've put that in what I was calling the Firebase config, which is okay. We'll call that the Stardust. I saw it. I saw it. Okay. Now, Stardust Firebase is not defined because I made a proper camel case here. All right, now we're getting 403s. And just says straight permission denied. Which is fine. but perhaps there's something we can see in Firestore. Let's try something like this. We have doc and get doc, right? We don't have get doc. Ah. Await is not defined. Yeah, this one's thenified, so we'll thenify this one. Missing or insufficient permissions. It doesn't tell us that it doesn't exist, though. Okay. Yeah, it's not giving us anything cute with other data. It's just telling us it doesn't exist. So either the rule, you have a different, there are a lot of different ways you can set up rules here for Firebase. Understand the Firebase security rules language. Yeah. And there are a lot of things you can use to make it happen. So let's back up for a second and think about this. So we know that Stardust is using Firebase for its data storage. We also know that they're kind of doing it in a weird way where they're sending their data to them first and then Firebase is kind of moving on from there. So it's almost as though they're encrypting it first and then it goes to Firebase. Which, if true, means that the data does reside on their servers at some point. And if what Zach Whitaker we saw from Zach is true, the encryption key, if it's sent home, means that it can't be encrypted when it gets there. You know what I mean? There has to be some process by which the data is encrypted before it is sent to Firebase. Which means there is a gap there. And even if it is encrypted in Firebase, if that encryption key is all you need to get it out, you're kind of out of luck there. But hey, good news is that at least the default security rules appear to be set up correctly for this config. Shouldn't there be a parentheses after the parameter res, or is my JS completely rusty? So you don't need it. Oh, this is just kind of imported. Yeah, so there was an extraneous parenthesis or parentheses, but actually you don't need parentheses around single arguments to fat arrow functions if you only have if you only have one. Yeah, so it was running fine. Okay. I'm thinking we're coming to kind of a stopping point with Stardust here, just because there's not a whole lot more we can do with the app unless there's anything else fun to find in the actual file. There's another plist. I don't think there's going to be anything too wild in there, though. What is a mom? Unreadable. It's like a data model. Here are all the frameworks that it uses. gRPC, AppAuth, MobileDB. Nothing too crazy in here. Ah, perfect. Magic Bytes hint to a plist again. Yeah. This is... Yeah, this is a plist as well. Nib archives look fun. Now, this is the kind of stuff that you would want to maybe look at in Xcode. So maybe now is a good time to pop over here. Now, I don't know how much we're going to be able to do with this, because in all honesty, I don't know what I'm doing with Xcode. But Yeah, I am not a mobile app dev. So yeah, I'm not about to like go add UI components to this thing piece by piece to try to make it work. So that may be our limit here. Now, one trick I was trying, I wasn't able to make it work, but maybe it's worth you checking out just so you're aware this can happen. There is a simulator in Xcode. So if I open a simulator, and of course, I'm on Big Sur, I'm limited by that. You may want to try this if you have a Monterey machine available. Fire up the simulator, right? And so what you want to do is fire up your simulator, and it turns out that you can actually drag the .app from the IPA, right? If you unwrap that, right, and get that Stardust.app, it turns out that you can drag and drop the app onto the simulator. But there is, if the app was made for a different version of iOS than you have, then you're going to have a bad time. But it is kind of an interesting trick. Yeah, you can see right now it's a little slow for me, but it's installing right now. But I'm going to get yelled at. It says Stardust needs to be updated. And, you know, also be aware that it's not like you can, I don't think, like set up proxies or anything. Maybe you can. I doubt it. Yeah, no. Allow HTTP services. Interesting. See you, Tonic. Thanks for hanging out. So I don't know how much you can actually get done with this thing, but it's kind of neat to know that it's here. So I think that's going to be where we call it for tonight. That's a little bit of a shorter stream, but we wanted to do as much of a deep dive into this thing as we can. So what do we know? We know that Firebase is in use by a lot of these apps, and we also know that the data to try to create an authentication, at least to some extent, with those credentials is bundled inside of these apps in many cases, and certainly within the Stardust app. The permissions, luckily, are set okay for the Stardust app, at least the way that we were trying to do it, to access things like storage and the real-time storage and Firestore, which are the two things we saw that it was using, the two Firebase components. But what we still don't know, really, is how the encryption, the end-to-end encryption, happens. End-to-end encryption means that it has to be encrypted first on the device and then sent. If that's true, we have some questions about why the encryption key, as Zach Whitaker showed, was getting sent, and then where it goes from there. But before we... Last thing I'll mention tonight is... Yeah, so if you're interested in looking for an alternative period tracker that is privacy respecting, She Networks recommended a Spot On for iOS, and I think that's probably a good one. Yeah. Oh, it's from Planned Parenthood. That makes sense. So this would be one to check out. And there's also Drip, which is for Android. Now, the other thing is that this thing is open source, I believe. Maybe it's on GitHub? Yes. It is. Written in JavaScript, okay. And a little bit of Ruby, interestingly. It's a React Native, okay. So we could check this out. But the idea with Drip, as I understand it, is that the data actually doesn't go anywhere. It's stored on your device entirely. Meaning, your data privacy is about your device privacy. And that's about as good as it's going to get. All right. So I think that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out. I think Saturday we're going to finally kind of chill. This was going to be kind of our summer vacation week, and then we had reason to look into this, right? But I think Saturday we're going to chill, just let everybody relax a little bit, and we're going to play Myst on stream. So if you want to join us for that, we're going to be doing that 10 a.m. Pacific. And just going to be a fun time for the community to hang out. Absolutely nothing serious taking place on that day. So the Taggart Institute goes on summer vacation on Saturday. Let's see. Is there anybody streaming right now? No, there isn't. So with that, everybody, going to let you go on your merry way. Have a great rest of your evening, or rest of your day. And I will see you on Saturday or coming up in the next week. Until next time, friends, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking. We'll see you next time.